Oh, so it's hilarious. So imagine trying to explain to a kid and they confuse taxes with Texas. All right. So ultimately, you could already know how much of a foul that is. And ironically enough, for anybody going ahead and paying attention to the whole situation within politics, and Ted Cruz getting exposed for a $650,000 financial, campaign contribution, while not wanting to go ahead and, explain the actual root of the money. Like for example, like if you were attempting to defraud somebody that started investing and saving as a child and tried using the factor of, juvenile delinquent record to go ahead and be like, who you gonna believe? Well, ironically enough, Ted Cruz, it's becoming pretty obvious to people. I didn't say Texas, I said taxes. It's like mixed words. Like, listen, if you're gonna try to defraud people, don't assume that just because of the factor you managed to weasel your way into a position of power means that anyone's going to let you get away with it. No. No. You know? Not to mention that, but ultimately, if you go ahead and make a joke about somebody's, capability or any potential, like, ultimately, where'd that money magically appear from? It's like funny. That magic, that money that you claim magically appeared and trying to make seem suspect and speculative ended up coming from starting a mutual fund at 15 years old. You know, after having to go ahead and get sent to a foster home, the group home that people want to go ahead and wanted to deny that I was in because the state of New York ended up deeming my mom an unfit parent and the abuse that I ended up, dealing with as a kid. So basically, the adults in the room are banking on the factor that the court is going to be gullible enough to not go and, beforehand take a look at that juvenile detention record that the court sealed. All right. It being sealed means it's not supposed to be accessible through a Freedom of Information Act. All right. Because ultimately, it was addressing somebody who at the time was a adolescent. So clearly, it's not going to have the updated where are they now. All right. But ultimately, that juvenile detention record goes and gets popped open. Ultimately, the entire community here gets to see exactly what the truth is and the amount of abuse that I ended up enduring. So all that minimalization done for years to try to continue to try to force silence on me. It's like, hey, guess what? Do you really think that Pedersen Craig would have helped you get the quote unquote upper hand that you had asked for if they knew that 20 years later, and assistance and, helping to try to holster an environment of forgiveness, that this was going to be the outcome? No. All right. And the funny thing is, when it comes down to the Pedersen Craig house wager, all right, because apparently Charlie thinks that, automatically not having any enemies automatically means you're safe. But meantime, is anyone really safe from past obligations? I wanted to try to see what information you can milk out. So just remember the personal terms of our wager, Masseri. All right? Your 21st finger, table saw. We're going to go ahead and play 20 questions. All right? We're going to play put a finger up. But you're only able to go ahead and contribute 20 to the conversation. Don't make bets that you don't plan on paying out, or that ultimately would be unconscionable, or, try to stake somebody's existence on you being willing to make that bet while simultaneously trying to claim, you have no enemies, so your life is peaceful. You fucked somebody else's life up thinking that you were doing the right thing and ended up going ahead and giving the abuser the wiggle room to get 20 years of forced slavery out of me. And this whole thing started back in 2002, 2003. The factor that we're here in 2024 and having to go ahead and address the issue with the court yet again ends up going ahead and saying it does not matter where you geographically went. It does not matter how much you wish that it was a dead issue, how much you hope and dream that you could just wish this nightmare away. Because do you know the upper hand that you have that I don't have in this situation? Yeah, just the process of getting to this far while, dealing with the medical negligence and medical malfeasance. Yeah, I'm about to lose my left fucking leg, as a byproduct of what you saw was a joke that there could be no harm in, while at the same time being absolutely ignorant to, your passive observing, while simultaneously not wanting to interject when abuses of power end up happening. Understand, that makes you just as complicit. You, Jim, Eddie, all right, you remember them? Matt, Kathy. Yeah. So understand something. If I am hesitant to be as peaceful in the circumstance, understand you gave 20 years to add as much insult to injury and harm and foul as possible, while simultaneously, egotistically, and pridefully thought that the worst case scenario could never happen, and congratulations, wake up, your worst nightmare is a reality. Oh, and the factor that there was 5 attempts to kill me, and the factor that I was able to go ahead and, clarify with the information exactly what I'd need to go ahead and argue to the judge to be able to go ahead and be like, hey, so understand, basically there's some people hoping that, you won't be able to substantiate the claim, especially because of the factor when it comes to judicial misconduct and prosecutorial misconduct. In order to be able to prove it, basically the judicial system will go ahead and implode, from the ramifications of going ahead and unsealing, a sealed adolescent, juvenile record, while simultaneously, the abuser that you went to go try to rule in their favor, well, yeah, they went to go power hungry and, went to go rent me out for indentured servitude for almost 20 years while wanting to gain plausible deniability, while wanting to say did nothing wrong. Well, simultaneously, by this point, I have endured majority of Geneva's checklist. All right. So the factor that it's 2024 and that I've endured most of Geneva's checklist says that, number one, you went way too far. Yes, this would end up being a issue that could be perceived as a threat to national security. Yes, absolutely. The determination and end result that ends up being, conclusion will go ahead and be important, because understand, going ahead and ruling that for one person while simultaneously understanding that the ramifications and the ripple effect of the determination of said verdict, especially with the way that the intertwining of the updating of technology and the evolution of technology ends up going ahead and playing an excruciating key mitigating factor, would end up going ahead and being an unmitigated disaster for everyone. So if that gets opened, ultimately the error in the ruling as a juvenile will go ahead and get exposed. All of the abuse that I endured will be a matter of public record and accessible via Freedom of Information Act. Anyone that tried claiming that as a kid the abuse that I ended up enduring was just me catastrophizing the situation. Now keep in mind, wanting to claim that I was catastrophizing the situation, well, the entirety of my abdominal area, think of a breastplate, okay? Think of a gladiatorial breastplate, all right? Can you imagine it on me? But imagine that gladiatorial breastplate was nothing but one giant black bruise, all right? Literally, ribs cracked because of, blunt. Yeah. kicked well down, knows. So are you understanding what damage that not backpedaling could end up doing? Because understand something, Charlie. If there's any more harm that ends up coming to me because of the situation that you manufactured because you fucked up by making a wrong judgment call, while thinking, oh, what harm is not correcting the situation because, I'm not the one that has to pay for the consequences of it. My response in that situation is, Charlie, it'll expose everything. It'll go ahead and expose my juvenile record. It'll expose all the abuse. It'll go ahead and expose all of it. All right. And ultimately, my family is banking on the factor of that not happening. While at the same time, when you've given somebody nothing to lose and be like, fuck it, let's go to mutually assured destruction. You went to go start getting a head start and trying to be as destructive as possible. So ultimately, just remember, the rule of the nuclear football is the reason that the nuclear football is nuclear is because if you spike it, if you go to showboat it, and you slam it down, if you try to showboat or glory hog, in the process of trying to test that theory at the earliest convenience, will blow anyone or anything that ended up going ahead and being used to cover up what happened to me. You will be considered a co-conspirator. You will be considered aiding and abetting ultimately all of the civil infractions, considering the factor of the Civil Rights Act that, plays a giant part in it, as well as the, if I remember correctly, it was the 1945 Declaration of Human Rights, which ended up assuring the factor that starvation as a abuse tactic is considered a war crime and considered a human rights violation. So to be like, we're going to turn a blind eye to somebody weaponizing starvation, understand, you get somebody hungry enough, the lengths that they'll go to satiate that hunger, it's kind of appalling. I don't know if you ever hit the level of starvation where your fight or flight mode kicks in, and ultimately you can't exercise any self-restraint. It is maddening. So that feels like a potential oversight, a fatal flaw in what you saw to be your grand plan, because apparently your opinion matters then more than the entire fucking judicial system. Trying to say your house, your rules, that type shit. Well, ultimately, you might want to go ahead and clarify about the unconstitutional and unconscionable, wagers that you wanted to go ahead and have going on, while at the same time being like, hey, we won't let things go too far. You let war crimes go uncalled for under your watch. You're culpable. The captain goes down with the ship.